Hello everyone. I'm Victoria, and this is our podcast, HARK&MOVE, when we discuss topics about studying abroad, internships, and motivation. Today I want to introduce you our guest. Her name is Yana, and she's currently a student at the Amsterdam University. Hi, Yana.
Hi everyone, my name is Yana. Currently, I live in Amsterdam and study at the University of Amsterdam Media and Culture program. So nice to see all of you.
Thank you. Maybe you could tell us more about yourself, about your hobby and the program you're studying now.
I'd love to. So currently, as I said before, I study at the Media and Culture program. I have decided to study it because when I was 16, I started working in the journalism field. I was the head of the media departments at around 186 medias, which students run. And I've decided to choose Media and Culture program because I was involved and engaged how media influence the cultural context, how it shapes our experience of the world. And I wanted to more deepen into the critical engagement with media by learning the history and theory of film in particular. So my main field is basically film studies. And after a bachelor degree, I'd love to be a film director.
So this sounds really great. As far as I know, your program in Amsterdam University is quite competitive. I don't know how to explain. It's ranked actually top in the first top in the sphere of media and culture. I'm right or not?
Yes, you're absolutely right. My university and this media programs, as well as communication science, is top ranked in the QS ranking and the Times, as far as I remember, for already 4 years. So that's why our university is famous for. So yeah, and also our university provide this program and has this high rank because of the amount of scientific papers students and professors write each year. And this amount is much higher than Stanford and Oxford universities. So basically, if you look at the scientific papers written by the universities, I think like about 85% or above it would be written by our university. And after that, it's mostly Oxford or Cambridge, which has the same programs. And as well as the acceptance rate of our uni is also quite high, but I think it depends on the program. It's not as selective as American universities, which I applied before, but I believe it's also very selective, especially for some programs as psychology and business administration.
Yes, that's actually why I asked about it. Was it really hard to get into the Amsterdam University, or maybe you thought about other universities, other program? Tell me please about it.
Honestly, it was such a random choice because firstly, I have applied to the American universities. I don't remember the names of them, but I think it was just a few unis which I liked, and I wrote the motivation letters. And it was the most difficult part to get a good CV because as most students after the school, even though I finished Russian school with 2 diplomas, the Russian one and the international, I had no chances to work during my studies. So I took a gap year. And during this gap year, I had a lot of work experience. I was running social medias of, as I said, 186 organizations, the student medias, as well as I was the social media editor in the dog shelter. So it was my main project. Also, I have started writing the script for the own volunteering project, as well as worked as a volunteer in Isaac mostly. And it was a great experience, which allowed me to apply and get to the American universities. Because as I said before, they're very selective. They requires you a lot of knowledge and not only school grades, which of course should be the highest, like 5 out of 5, the GPA. But as well, they also requires you to provide something extraordinary about yourself, to show that you're passionate about the field you have chosen. And that's why it took me a year, which were almost not enough. But it helped me significantly to understand which direction should I choose and what documents do I need to prepare. So first, I got applied to the American universities, to 2 of 3 universities I applied to, and I received a scholarship, and one which were the about, I think, $106,000. But after that, I realized that I want to study in Amsterdam because it's much better experience for me.
I see. Actually, that's funny because I also took such a gap year, and I don't know. For me, it's really unfortunately that in Russia it's not so popular, like experience. Yeah, but anyway, now you live in Amsterdam. And I actually want to ask you, have you or did you face with any difficulties, for example, with finding a place for live and accommodation, or maybe problems with adaptation? Because I know that in Amsterdam are maybe really high living costs. Maybe you can tell something about it.
Yeah, I think it's an important issue to discuss because many students don't know about it before going to Amsterdam. They believe they can find the flat easily and they start searching for a place to live even like 2 weeks before studies, which is never enough. My friend, she was familiar with this problem and she started finding accommodation in May, but we found it only in October, almost at the end. So for this whole time, we were searching for the places, and the accommodation is firstly really expensive. The place we live right now is cost about 1,500 euros. It's quite a big place to live, but there are 2 rooms and the price is still high, and it's not Amsterdam, it's like a suburbs. But in Amsterdam, the living place is much more expensive, which is very unfortunate. It's the first problem. And the second problem, that it's really difficult to find it for students, especially because in Amsterdam, first, they prefer, of course, like domestic students, because or at least students who live in Europe, because it's much easier to get in contact with their parents in case something happens and they won't be able to pay. Because for me, for Russian student, it's much harder to find a place to live, because if something happens with the payment or with the card, they couldn't go to Russia to ask my parents to pay, for example. So the third problem is the student problem, yeah, because not only the country where you're from, but also the budget, which is usually limited, and not stable job. So usually people who has flats and provide them, they prefer people with working contracts. It's much easier.
Yeah, actually, you clearly mentioned that the living costs are really high. So I think many students, many international students, are forced to work in the Netherlands, as far as I understood. And I actually know that you have some working experience in the Netherlands. Can you tell us more about this, and what is really is it really difficult for foreigners to find a job there, or it's just a stereotype?
Honestly, I haven't worked a lot in the Netherlands because I had about 4 jobs in Russia. So it was quite enough time of working for me. But I work as a producer in Amsterdam. And I also work as an assistant in a gymnasium. It's a Russian gymnasium when you help with teaching process. Also, you work as a nurse, I suppose. So you control the child's mental health and their mood, which is pretty interesting job. And I was lucky to find it because as it's called Russian Gymnasium, there are some working space for Russian people, and it was much easier to get a job and to assimilate in it. Concerning other jobs, you can easily get to some non-professional jobs, which doesn't require too much professional and studying experience, such as waitress or plumber. I mean this. And as a waitress, you can easily get to any restaurant or cafe you want. It doesn't matter if you're an international student from Russia or from Europe, but usually it's much easier to find a job when you're a European student, because the problem is that they have to make a working permit for you. And working permit is a document which takes about 2 months to make, and not every boss wants to do this. So of course, it's much easier to apply a European student who can work without this working permit. And it's just about the documentation. I don't think it's connected with some racist theories or prejudices. It's just the document part in the Netherlands, which is usually quite long.
Yeah, I think it's really long sometimes. So we started talking about finances, and now I'd like to touch one topic that is really that is not entirely positive, but nevertheless, it is important, and I think many people are interested to know more about it. You know that that a lot has changed since the events of February, and maybe you could tell me, have you encountered difficulties, including financial ones, for example, and were there any problems with Russophobia, or on the contrary, some support from the locals?
That's a tough question. I believe that it really depends on the country. In the Netherlands, I think that there were a lot of misconceptions and prejudice that locals would hate Russians, and there would be some stereotypes, but I haven't faced with any of it. Yeah, of course, there were some problems with maybe students who were not familiar with what's happening in Russia, with the governmental structure and some details, which you may know either if you study politics or if you live in Russia. So of course, they were not familiar with this, and they might be really interested in the issue. But our university was really helping everyone. For instance, when the events of February have started, our uni has introduced some lectures where the events have been described, what the original idea, yeah, the consequences. So everything has been discussed. Also, we all Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian students, they have received the email with an advice to get to the student counselor. It's a person who talks with students about some particular issues like deadlines and some problems. So I used this opportunity. I went to the student counselor. We talked a bit about the events, and she suggested me that the universities has opened 2 funds. The first one is a credit for 500 euros, which were given to anyone without any deadline. So you can theoretically give it back in 10 years or even like in 50, I don't know. It was not stated yet. And secondly, the fund for, as I said, Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian students has been introduced, and you can ask to 3,000 euros for each student, and it's not refundable. You just get it for some payments, for your housing, for the food, but it's not the final thing. We also had been given 5 sessions with a psychologist, which of course were really helpful, as well as we also got some extensions for the deadlines, because of course not everyone could feel well mentally, especially during these events. So to all students who are somehow involved in this conflict, either mentally or via some sanctions against Russia, they got an opportunity to go to 5 free sessions. And get the deadlines for all the exams they need.
So actually, I'm very pleased to that everything has turned out this way, and that there is an quite, I don't know, understanding environment in the Netherlands actually. So I think actually we have a little more time, and I would like to go back to your studies, and maybe you could identify top 5 things which you like about your studying in the Netherlands. Maybe um, some things which we can see in Russian educational system. What you mentioned through these years, yeah.
That's really difficult to find 5 things because personally, of course, I like the education abroad, but Amsterdam was my random choice. And if I applied to the New York University and got there, maybe I would love it more, the experience. But overall, I believe that there are a lot of differences from the Russian educational system. And that's basically why I have chosen to study abroad. So firstly, it's the attitude towards students. I was really fascinated by the patience and the helpful atmosphere, which was all over the years of my studying. Even though I might find some difficulties, especially it was mentally really difficult to assimilate into the new culture, to the new students and professors. Our teachers could always give us some support and provide some psychological help by themselves and as well as by psychologists. So it's the first thing, because support is of course really important, especially when you study abroad. Secondly, I believe it's the program, how it's made. I'm a teacher myself, so I have some comments, and I was really fascinated how the subjects were made. I personally like the American system more because there you can choose the subjects, especially in art universities. But here you have some subjects which you have like mandatory subjects and some additional ones. So the mandatory subjects were not always interesting, but even though they might be not my choice, which I could make myself, but I still liked the way they were structured, they were combined, and the way how all the courses throughout the 3 years were interconnected. So I couldn't say that some information during the 3 years were not interesting or not intertwined with each other, which is really great. We didn't have any useless subjects. So I liked here to mention that we come to the third point, which is the amount of courses. During the year, I could not recall the number of courses, but for the first semester, we have no more than 3 courses, which is really good because it helps you to deepen and to understand what's happening after the summer, and you don't have too much thing to work on. And the fourth thing is that I believe that it's really important when the professors give you some time to independent studies. Yeah, because as far as I know, in Russia, you have a lot of seminars, lectures, but here we had more independent work. We had several seminars or several lectures per week, and the rest of time we work in the library, collaborate with each other. So it helps you to become a more independent student, as well as to find the internship ourselves. So we, of course, can search for some support from the university, but here at the university, it's not a school anymore. We try to find how to study. We learn to do this, and we take the responsibilities for attendance because usually it's not counted. And final thing, I suppose it's the international atmosphere, because when you study abroad, you can face with a lot of different students from all over the world, studying from US to Shanghai. So I think it's really interesting to exchange some experience with people all over the world. So I believe it's my top 5 things I would like to mention.
Thank you so much. So we can learn a lot of cool things, I think, from the educational system of the Netherlands and the West, the Europe in general. However, for some reason, we moved back actually now, but okay, whatever, it doesn't matter. Last thing which I wanted to ask you, what about your plans for the future? If it's not a secret, are you going to continue your studies abroad or not? Maybe you know where. So yeah, tell me please.
Of course, currently, due to the all events and maybe some difficulties, it might be hard to believe that something would be stable and my plans would be and remain the same. But for now, I would love to continue studying abroad. I wanted to study in US, but now I'm unsure about it. If I get a chance to get to the summer school next year and see how it goes, I still would like to apply to New York University, New York Academy, and to some French and English universities for the filmmaking. I would like to be a film director and a script writer. Currently, I haven't chosen one role, but I believe I could definitely combine them. So I'd like to study and get master in this field for either 1 or 3 years. During this time, I'm planning to work, of course, because I'm paying for my studies and for some expenses. And I'd like to start working not only as a tutor or as a producer or an assistant in gymnasium, but also as a filmmaker abroad. It might be more difficult to find a job there, especially on the commercial base, but I'd like to start working there as soon as possible. So it helps me to get some connections and after that continue working after studies. So I have a lot of plans and I'd love that I have a lot of plans and I would like them to happen in the real life, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, I wish all your dreams will come true. Thank you very much for joining our dialogue today.